Welcome to CrossRoads on TVI. I'm your host, Manjula Salvaraja. We would like to congratulate our assistant producer, Srinikant, and his lovely fiancée, Petunia, on their recent engagement. Congratulations. And today we're going to have a wonderful show. We'll be speaking about a successful startup firm, hear about amazing efforts to restore the Rouge, and discuss the diabetes epidemic in our communities. If you'd like to call in with a question or comment, our number is 416-623-8100. In light of the much talked about IPO of Facebook this week, I sat down with the co-founders of a wonderfully successful technology startup firm called Netfirms to hear about their amazing business journey so far. Two students, Thomas Savundranayagam and Suhan Sanmugadas, started the business over 13 years ago. The company now hosts over 1 million websites, and they have this gorgeous glass tower bearing its name overlooking the Don Valley Parkway. An inspiring basement to boardroom story. Here is that very enjoyable interview.
I think we can all blame it on the internet. It was a great distraction back then, and Suhan and I got into business because we were trying to study for an exam, or I was studying for an exam, and we thought of what can I do to sort of think of something else to do.
I think the traditional view is, you sort of get an education, get a degree, and then you go get a job at a large company that has, a stable, secure job or security. So going into business for myself was, it was a bit, I think, worrisome for them. But I think, in retrospect, everything worked out. So I think they're very happy the way things worked out. But initially, it was a bit challenging, and I can see where they're coming from as well. It is a bit of a risk, but we were young and a little stupid. But things worked out quite well, so that's good.
Netfirms grew to a size of, almost hosting over 1 million websites worldwide. We had about 65 employees, and just about a year ago, we sort of sold our interest in that business to a Boston-based group. So the company still exists, Netfirms still exists as a wonderful brand. Just we've decided to move on from there. Over the years, it's been a wonderful journey. One thing we kept as a focus, we focused on small business. I think it's very important to start a company not around a product type, but around a target customer. Our target customer is always small business, and although we added a lot of different products, we've always remained core to that group.
We've generally gone with businesses and business ideas that kind of have been somewhat proven, but early on in its infancy. So there's some people that come up with brand new ideas, and don't get me wrong, that often works, but I think there's probably a little more risk associated with something like that because it's not market tested. Because I might think this is the best thing since sliced bread, but I may be the only one who thinks that, right? So you don't know, and not to say that it doesn't work. So we've actually gone with ideas that sort of, we've always kind of been in the tech space. So we've looked at sort of what people are doing in that space, and we've sort of seen people sort of, have certain ideas or certain business models, and we like those business models, and they've worked, but we felt they could be improved upon. So let's take that. That's great. There's obviously, the business model works. There's a need for it. There's a want for it. But we feel we can take that and sort of improve upon it, and that's kind of what we've done with our businesses, and that's. It's a little more safer, not to say that, the brand spanking idea is not going to work. If you look at Facebooks and like things like YouTube, those are pretty much brand new ideas that sort of just, went huge. But, that's what's worked for us in the past.
As you're inventing a new product, does your solution or your offering at least 10 times better than what the market exists today? Then you have a sure win. But even if you can't find something that's 10 times as big, see if you can find something that's at least 3 times as big. Just make it something small. But it's hard for someone to launch a company and do something that's groundbreaking, but requires a behavior change. There are companies out there, for example, electric car. It's a wonderful idea, but it requires a huge behavior change. You have to go find places to plug it in and all that stuff. But here comes a company called Prius. You know, they have married both. They've got the electric benefits, but you just fill up the gas tank, so that requires no behavior change. So for products to be successful, including the products that we're working on, we want to minimize the behavior change and improve the dramatic benefits. If you can get those two combinations working, then you've got a hit product.
We were friends in university beforehand. I think that helps, because you want to sort of go into business with people that you're comfortable being with, being around, spending, because you will be spending, you know, 8-9 hours a day with this person, probably more so than your family. So it's a long time. So I think, you know, it's good to have people you're comfortable with, as well as someone that you really trust, because business is, you know, it's a beast in itself. And you know, if you're not, you definitely want to be working with people you're comfortable and you trust, because if that doesn't work, then you're not going to really take on the rest of the world if your inside house isn't working. And I think you look at your skill sets, and it's good to find people who have complementary skill sets. I think, you know, varying personality types can obviously succeed in business. It's not just one or two. And I think there's often a misconception. People assume that, you know, you have to be the A-type personality, you have to be the most vocal person in the room, you have to be, you know, pushy, forward, all that sort of stuff. And I think that's a bit of a misconception, because I know I'm personally not like that, and I didn't find any of my partners like that. But we all were able to still succeed in business. And Good to Great talks quite a lot about that as well. If you look at, you know, your top CEOs, many of them aren't the A-type personalities that people think they are. They're a lot more humble than people perceive them to be.
You need to really be confident, but also have a sense of humility. I mean, you have to really believe in yourself, and I think that takes time, and it comes with experience. You know, a lot of times entrepreneurs, you know, you have a great idea, but to have the patience to sort of go through the whole process is a lot harder. You need to have support family-wise. You need to have. We found it wonderful to have partners. I think it's good to have co-founders when you start a business, because it's a very lonely place there. Because sometimes you feel like, why are we doing this? And you know, and when you have a sort of a group that you can chat with and discuss, it makes it much more interesting. Formal education is good. That being said, I only completed part of my formal education, and part of it is because of the opportunity that existed. If I had waited a few more years, I think the opportunities would have been different. I mean, some of the most interesting companies that are founded today, you know, have had founders that went into university, but sort of left a little earlier to pursue other interests. But I think the sort of the discipline of getting into university is very, very important. I think it can really help you understand how to interact with different people, you know, to learn about subjects and the discipline of, you know, completing tasks. There's a lot of benefit of formal education there. You know, it's a lot of fun when you have a small group of people working with you. Some of our best hires, best employees, we got over 12 years ago, back in 2000. We got some of the best employees that we still have relationships with. When you're small, it's wonderful. But as you start getting bigger, you have to deal with people and personalities. I think one of our biggest challenges, and I think a lot of business entrepreneurs face, is dealing with different people. You know, you have to grow, you have to add a layer of bureaucracy. So just dealing with finding the right people has always been a challenge. We discovered this a lot later on, how to hire the right people. And it all starts with one important piece, which is every company needs to have a culture, a purpose, a why. When we first started out, we didn't really have all those things written down. But we discovered this as we started hiring good people. We were trying to find out what makes them good. Why did they fit our culture? We've also hired people that, you know, may be great for other companies, but just simply weren't good for us. There were people that, so I think when I say culture, we had to figure out what are things that you value as a company. There's certain things that we discovered along the way that made sense for us. I think it's important for us to turn on and off mentally when you're doing certain things. When you're playing with the kids, like, play with them. But when you have a moment and you want to think or dream, some of the best ideas come when you're not exactly at work. I think, you know, people like Leonardo da Vinci, like some of his best ideas came by just doing other things. He was looking at nature and he was able to connect different things together. So work-life balance, I think if you want to be an entrepreneur, that's something you're going to have to give up. You're not going to be able to do it. Sorry.
Okay.
I think Canada is a very good place. You're next to the US, one of the largest markets in the world. You have a great education system with lots of top universities. You've got a very good pool to tap into. Of course, in terms of funding, a lot of people are not as risky in Canada, which actually may be a good thing, because only perhaps the best ideas get funded. Look, let me put it this way. I could never start a company like this, like Netfirms, if I was living in a country in Africa, for example, or many countries in Asia. I think there's just so much bureaucracy and red tape that really prevents. We take a lot of things for granted. I know we complain about there's no lack of funding and no lack of resources to help Canadians launch businesses, but I think there is. In fact, I spoke to a group of grade 7 kids in just outside of Hamilton a few months ago, and I was really blown away by the optimism the kids had, and the fact that they had an entrepreneur club in a grade 7 class. Now, if you have things like this at a young education level, you can see some great ideas come across. I also think there should be way more female entrepreneurs. I'm part of an entrepreneur group, and amongst the 8 of us, there's maybe 2 women there. I think women should be also be part of this entrepreneurial game change that we're going through. Well, I would say the biggest opportunity right now is the fact that a lot more people are being connected worldwide. When we first started this business, there might have been maybe 100 million people connected on the internet. Now there's about 2 billion people actually connected on the internet, and it's going to be about 4 billion in the next couple of years. All of it's driven by a couple of things. One is mobile. Everyone's got smartphones. The other thing is everyone's moving towards cloud computing. It's another word for saying if you have an application that's running on the internet, they call it cloud computing. So mobile and cloud, and sort of the fact that we have all this sort of resources and talent all around the world, you can create some very, very interesting companies with a few minimal staff. Really, all you need now is just an idea, and you can really, I mean, the economics of doing all kinds of businesses make sense when you can actually reach a market of almost 2 billion people. I mean, when we were starting with 100 million people, that was okay, but when you have 2 billion, that's a huge, huge opportunity. So there's going to be lots of people around the world that are going to come online, and if you can find solutions that can capture their needs, you can build global brands. You know, a lot of companies are focusing on software. Pretty soon, people will be making stuff that are based on hardware, because the cost of producing hardware is also coming down significantly. So there's a lot of exciting opportunities. We've taken a pause, and we're looking at sort of doing some of the things all over again. And now we're back in sort of a startup mode. We're launching a company that is built around a simple but powerful idea, which is your privacy. And today in our connected world, there's so much stuff that you can do, but lots of us, a lot of people are just sort of endangering their privacy accidentally. It's one thing to post and tweet something, but it's another thing to store your tax documents or your important family documents or photos safely. So we're launching a sort of a cloud service that can sort of handle all that. It's coming soon, and we'll keep you posted.
It was a real pleasure speaking to them. Thomas and Suhan had so many insightful things to say about the art and science of starting a business. They also recommended a few reads for other entrepreneurs. Here they are. The first one, a well-known book, it's called Good to Great. The second one, for anyone who's looking for tapping venture capital to take them from sort of a small to medium to large stage, is a book called Venture Deals. And the third that they kept going on about is the Harvard Business Review. They said that whatever problems you have in business, if you read the Harvard Business Review, there's always a solution somewhere in there. We look forward to hearing about the launch of their next business really soon and wish them the best of luck. Stay with us. You're watching CrossRoads on TVI with Manjula Selvarajah. Welcome back to CrossRoads on TVI with Manjula Selvarajah. In 2011, the Rouge was declared Canada's first urban park, to much celebration by nature lovers and environmentalists who had been fighting for the protection of that area for years. Kiruthiha Kulendiran is the Ontario Science Manager of the David Suzuki Foundation. She joins us today to talk about the Rouge and her passion for getting this to be our passion. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you, Manjula. Thank you for having me on the show.
My pleasure. So tell us about the David Suzuki Foundation.
Wow, where do I begin? Long time ago in a land far, far away, well, David Suzuki is a much treasured and much valued.
He's an icon.
Exactly, a much loved Canadian icon. And there is, I doubt if there's a single child in Canada who doesn't go googly-eyed when you say David Suzuki. Because you imagine the scientist, and he is a scientist, but he's a very engaged scientist who, for the last 30 years of his life, has dedicated his time and energy to conserving Canadian natural heritage. And that in itself is his challenge. He sees it as a gift that we need to preserve, protect, care for, and grow, so that for generations to come, Canadians of all shapes and forms, of all cultures and denominations, of all orientations and roots, will eventually embrace it and identify with it, so that it becomes Canadian heritage, Canadian treasure. Canada is highly unique globally. Mm-hmm. Our landmass has changed very little over the 100,000 years, despite global shifts.
Size versus population.
Exactly.
Yeah, area, I mean, versus
and in terms of
yeah.
tectonics, in terms of plate movement as well, the glacialization, as the ice age shifted, if you can imagine 20 meters depth of ice covering this land, as it shifted northwards, our land hasn't shifted since then. So we have very precious commodities in terms of fresh water, in terms of forest land, in terms of rainforest, in terms of minerals. And this is part of our natural heritage. So when you say, I am Canadian, it's a lot bigger than just drinking the beer.
That is so interesting to me. That is actually a really good point, because we think of, everyone kind of moves on to the multiculturalism or the hockey or the whatever, but you've actually made the environment, the way that the country actually looks. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
and that is who David is. David Suzuki, for me personally, encompasses that vision. He himself is a third generation Japanese. Mm-hmm. He was interred in Ontario during World War II, he and his family. He knows the pain of war, what it can do to families, surrender it. He also understands the complexity of having to travel across Canada and have to build routes and create identity for yourself as a child, as a youth, and as an adult. What has been his gift to Canada, and from my perspective as a woman of color, as a Tamil woman, and as an immigrant who had the privilege to choose Canada as a home, is that he gives me the tools, the veritable tools, to engage and protect Canada on my terms and on my agenda, so that we continue to preserve Canada eternally, beyond the global based political machinations of water being a commodity, timber being a commodity, stripping and raping this land so that it feeds the ultimate appetite of some conglomerate far, far away and far removed from the lived realities of Jane and Finch corridor or Kingston Galloway or Malvern, not even realizing that the Canadians who live here, you and I, have this heritage. This is our inheritance, and I'm here to stay. So therefore, I am Canadian.
So what are some of the things that the foundation itself does to get out that message?
Well, so David Suzuki Foundation was created 20 years ago in 1989, 1990. David himself and his wife Tara Kohler Suzuki, came together with a group of friends, environmentalists from different walks of life, and they came to an island called Pender Island in in BC, where they sat down and they were frustrated. It was born out of a frustration where they realized that there wasn't any set voice, any unified voice that was addressing issues of environment-based appropriation and co-opting. So Haida Gwaii, the Haida Gwanas National Park, was born as a result of their efforts, for example, where they worked collaboratively with the First Nation, with the Haida Gwaii First Nation, to create this national park. So the last 20 years, the David Suzuki Foundation has taken on what used to be global issues, but has also now become extremely Canadian-centric issues. So things around national parks, things around wilderness, species at risk, wildlife preservation, endangered species, northern regions as well. So the Arctic belt, around preservation and access to clean water, agriculture, fisheries, ensuring that we have all those things that we take for granted in our environment, ensuring that sustains. Because the foundational premise of the David Suzuki Foundation is that we don't sit at the top of the pyramid. We are encompassed within the environment. The environment is that which embraces us, sustains us, and preserves us. So therefore, as being an integral part of that environment, we are duty bound, because the air that I breathe is the air that you breathe. So if I have the audacity and the presumption to believe that I want clean air, then I need to have the responsibility to know that I have to gift that clean air back to you.
Wow. Well put. So then that brings me to my next question. I know this was in a lot of news stories. It certainly made a lot of headlines. You know what I'm going to ask you, because you've probably been asked this a million times. Recently, David Suzuki decided to actually step away from the board of his foundation, a foundation in his name. Why is that? What was the reaction? Why is that, and what was the reaction to that within the organization itself?
One of the things that David is much loved for and much admired for is his tenacity. He is not someone who will shy away from naming things. If it is wrong, it's wrong, and he will name it. And he is not afraid to name it, because that is what he sees a lack of in Canadian society, is that we see it and then we sit back and wait for somebody else to say, okay, I'm going to take and run with it. David does take and run with it. He's a scientist as well. So there is a belief pattern that is now building up in federal thought processes that looks to muzzle scientists, that looks to silence advocacy, that looks to silence those vital dialogues, those vital conversations that need to be had as to why are we shipping Ontario peaches all the way across the oceans, all the way to China, to have it canned and packaged there, to then be sent back to Canada to be sold to Canadian consumers. Why do we need to do that? Why can't we do that here and create Canadian jobs here and do it in a way that's environmentally responsible? And why do we need to step away from Kyoto? Why do we need to do this? Why do we need to do that? Why aren't we doing it like this?
And so he's been a strong voice of activism.
He has been an immensely strong voice, and he has been, and that is what is David. So when he saw the constant muzzling of scientists, the constant top-down, big brother attitude, enough was enough. In addition to that, he's in his 70s. He's a grandfather many times over. He has given us 30 years of his life, and he's given us far more than that in terms of his mind and soul and body. And he knows that David Suzuki Foundation will sustain. We have a very firm foundation on his core beliefs and his wife's core beliefs, and we will grow from that. So it's a multiple faceted situation. He stepped away, yes, but the foundation will continue going from strength to strength.
Well, with strength of this nature, you're practically convincing me. So let's talk about the Rouge. I mean, this was huge news last year. Yes. It was declared the first urban national park in Canada, right? And you think this is an important thing, and you think it's important that people participate in the process, be it of advocacy or actually restoring the park. Can you speak to that? Tell us about the Rouge first,
okay.
Actually.
I just want to make a point of clarification, because there's a common belief that it's a done deal.
Yeah, it's not a done deal.
Okay, so when we say that it was declared an urban national urban park, it wasn't declared as such. It was more declared as this plot of land, this tract of land will in the future become a national park under the aegis of Parks Canada, under the federal jurisdiction.
With some funding tied to that decision.
That was not mentioned.
Okay,
so
interesting.
what the throne speech said very clearly and succinctly was intent. Intent to grow, intent to establish. That intent was reiterated again quite clearly in the first budget and the second subsequent budget, but no money was attached to it. So yes, the intent is very much there. It's very blatant. It's very present. Parks Canada is doing an amazing job creating awareness as much as they can within their cutbacks, which they've gone through quite a bit as well. So they are stretching the dime to make it happen, because you can't say stretching the penny anymore. But the reality is, it hasn't reached that status. To get from where it is right now, which is under a provincial and a municipal jurisdiction, so it is under the governance of TRCA, Toronto Region Conservation Area, and under the aegis of Pickering, Scarborough, Toronto, and Markham municipalities as well. Yeah. To get from that point to federal, under Parks Canada and federal jurisdiction with federal funding, requires an act of parliament.
Okay.
So the existing Parks Act is very focused on wilderness. It's like, if you think of parks, you think of Jasper, you think of Kawani, you think of Banff. It's all wilderness based. Given that the Rouge Park is sitting in the Eastern GTA, so you're looking at, everybody knows how to get to the Toronto Zoo. Well, Toronto Zoo is a subset. It sits within the Rouge Park. The Toronto Zoo itself won't become part of the Rouge Park, the Rouge National Park. So it's sitting with borders on the right-hand side with Pickering and on the left with Scarborough and Markham. Yeah. It'll stretch all the way from Lake Ontario all the way to Oak Ridges Moraine. So on the northern border will be Whitchurch, Stouffville. So it's a huge tract of land, 60 square kilometers. It's going to be the largest urban national park in the world, 18 times bigger than Central Park. Okay. So it's a phenomenal project. Having said that, because it's not wilderness, and because we can't let naturally occurring forest fires take its route, because then poof, Markham flies, and Scarborough's burning, because there has to be intervention. That's also because there is working farms on this land. So grade 1 agriculture is still practiced in this land, because there is a myriad of other complex issues like 2 national historic sites. There are many factors that have to play into realizing this act. So it's going to become a subset act. There will be an act standalone for the Rouge Park. And that is the David Suzuki Foundation recommendation. In no way do we want the existing Parks Canada Act to be interfered with or diminished in its protective measures, because parks like Banff and all the other national parks are true wilderness, and they do need the protective measures. Rouge National Park is, with its urban proximity, with its access to almost 20% of the Canadian population, is unique in the jewels that are the national parks.
Well, you bring up a good point in that last bit too. You said, that the fact that 20% of the population can access this park. I mean, it could become a treasure in this country, right? If it isn't already by most of the people that live in that area. So how do you think, specifically the Canadian Tamil community, do you think could engage to actually further that cause?
Well, as I was saying about the footprint, Markham and Scarborough, that's Tamil land. I mean, seriously? you cannot walk 3 steps without meeting a brother or a sister. So that is something we need to acknowledge. This park, we need to feel it as it belongs to me, to us. And you're so right, Manjula. This is going to be the ultimate jewel in the Parks Canada pantheon because of its proximity to 20%, and of which almost 3 million Canadians, 3 million out of 35 million, will be able to do an easy commute to this park within 1 hour, either by car, by bus. A TDC ticket will take you into the bus depot that can then get you onto a trail inside the park. This is unheard of. So you're talking about increased tourism. This park has a very ancient First Nations heritage. The carrying place. Any grade-5 child will tell you about the carrying place and the portage routes from Lake Ontario to Lake Simcoe. And subsequent settlement made that the fur trade route. And it's only one of the 3 living remains or archaeological remains of Seneca village as well. So I myself see myself as being First Nation. I identify as being First Nation of my own motherland. And therefore, I carry responsibility to preserve and showcase the First Nation of my heartland, which is Canada. So this is where the Tamils can get engaged in. This is an opportunity for us to showcase how we were dismantled culturally, historically, archaeologically, and environmentally, because we carry inherent culture that embraces environment. Our pretext in Tamil heritage is that we are one of a many. We are a collective, and we live in harmony with our nature, in harmony with our family and our community. And it's that's what the strength is. So this is an opportunity for the Tamil community to say, this is an area we are an expert in. This is our heartland. This is where we belong. And this is how we invest, by going into the park, by saying, what can I do? Can I plant trees? Can I plant wildflowers? Can I become a steward? Can I be trained to become a hike master or a trail steward? So there's so many myriads of ways that they can take ownership. But on top of that, think about the tourism. Tourism goes up, businesses goes up. That is a great opportunity. We excel as a community in business. This is a major opportunity.
So, you've, it's interesting because the team at CrossRoads has seen you be an activist in a variety of areas, right? Women's issues, I can name a whole bunch, right? Why is this personally, you are very passionate about this. Why this particular cause?
I feel very strongly that the Tamil community in Canada, we have lost a lot. We have lost far more than we can put down on one literature, one book, one paper, or even communicate without losing ourselves in that conversation. One of the fundamental ways for us to recollect and address that loss is from an environment. When we plant a tree in memory of somebody we lost in the war or in this tsunami, what we're doing is we're saying, I am here to stay. That is a very strong message we give to the community. And in that message, we are also reclaiming for myself and I and we, my children, that my child can come back and see that tree and say, Amma planted that. Amma planted that for Mama who died, and that becomes the connection. And then my grandchildren can come back. So the environment is what was taken away from us. Our land that was taken away, our cultural pretext that was taken away, is all embedded in the fabric that is the environment. And the Rouge National Park gives us an opportunity to reclaim that identity.
Wonderfully put. Thank you so much for coming today. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Pleasure indeed. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
And we'll have you on again. I've told you, right? There's a whole bunch of other topics we want to talk about when it comes to the... And Anjali Appadurai wants to be on too, so we're going to have... we'll be having conversations over the next couple of months. For more information or to volunteer, please also take a look at Friends of the Rouge. They can be found at www.frw.ca. They're a wonderful non-profit community-based organization in case you want to get out there, you want to plant trees, do some advocacy work. We're going to take a break. You're watching CrossRoads on TVI with Manjula Salvaraja. Welcome back to CrossRoads on TVI with Manjula Salvaraja. Diabetes is the fastest growing disease in the world. It is estimated that over 300 million people suffer from diabetes globally, and it is linked to around 40,000 deaths a year in Canada. Now here's another worrying statistic. South Asians are 6 times more likely to develop diabetes than their white European counterparts. To tell us about this epidemic and his research, I'm joined by Dr. Ravi Retnakara, a clinician scientist with the renowned Leadership Sinai Centre for Diabetes at Toronto's Mount Sinai Hospital. Welcome to the show. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to have you here, and this is really worrying. I mean, a lot of our people that have heard that we were having you on wanted to really hear more about it because there's there seems to be a little bit of ignorance out there about the different forms of diabetes. I mean, I had to read up on this, and I have family members that have actually suffered from this. So my understanding again is that with type 1 diabetes, you see that more in children, youth. It's not something that you can really prevent. But type 2 diabetes is a completely different story and represents a majority of the cases that are out there. So can you tell us a little bit more about type 2 diabetes?
Absolutely. So, it's good you prefaced it that way, because there is a lot of misconceptions about diabetes out there, and it's particularly relevant for the South Asian community, as you say. And the really important thing about these misconceptions is that there are things that you can do about diabetes, and so we'll talk about that. So what is type 2 diabetes? So type 2 diabetes refers to a spectrum of conditions in which the body is not able to handle glucose or sugar properly. And when I say spectrum, I'm referring to the fact that there are many metabolic defects that lead to type 2 diabetes. But at the end of the day, you can summarize these as reflecting two main problems. One is a resistance in the body to the action of insulin, which is the hormone that is primarily responsible for disposal of glucose or use of glucose in our body. And the other problem is inability of the body to secrete enough insulin for its needs. And that's something that's done by the pancreas, or a specific set of cells called the beta cells. And so we refer to these problems, the first one as insulin resistance, and the second one as beta cell dysfunction.
Interesting. Okay, good definition. That's actually good for me to know. We put this all in context. This is, again, as we said, the fastest growing disease in the world. It is an epidemic. People shouldn't fool themselves. This is an epidemic. And it is also known as the silent killer. I mean, are there any stats you can share about what's happening globally? I hear, again, that this is, in India, for example, the numbers are extraordinary of how many people, either have the onset or already have diabetes.
Yeah, the numbers are changing as we speak, and that's why as soon as they come out of my mouth, they're obsolete. Yeah. To give some general numbers to put it in context, so in 2000, it was estimated that there were 100 million cases of diabetes in Asia leading the world.
Just in Asia?
Just in Asia.
Wow.
India being the country with the greatest prevalence of diabetes. And it was predicted that by 2025, in that 25 years, from 2000 to 2025, India would have the biggest increase of any country in the world. And now we're halfway there. It's 2012. Now what's become apparent is, one, the numbers are all wrong. They're going to be much higher than were predicted. Two, that while the numbers are enormous in India, India is being challenged by China as well. So two countries with large populations having this huge explosion of diabetes. To put it in a Canadian context, so this is, first of all, when we talk about Asia, we're talking about a part of the world from which Canada draws a tremendous amount of immigration. So this is very relevant for the Canadian healthcare system. And indeed, the Canadian Diabetes Association has predicted that by 2020, so just 8 years from now, diabetes will be affecting up to 1 in 8 adults in Canada, which is enormous.
Which is an enormous number. Now, something that you said, coming back to, again, which is actually why we're here to talk about this too, is that this is additionally worrying for South Asians. Like you said, the number in India is going up. We have a huge South Asian diaspora here. Talk to us about that. Why is it that someone who's South Asian is almost 6 times as likely to develop diabetes than their sort of counterparts, than their white European counterparts? Why is that?
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting, and it's actually an area that I do research in. And if you go back to what I said right at the beginning about those two primary causes, insulin resistance and beta cell dysfunction, and that latter problem, the beta cell dysfunction, is absolutely necessary for developing diabetes. I preface my comments that way because South Asians clearly have differences in insulin resistance from other ethnic groups.
Okay.
And essentially what happens is that as we gain weight centrally around our belly, and in particular as we gain fat around our abdominal organs, or intra-abdominal fat or visceral fat, as that expands, it leads to a series of metabolic changes and changes in proteins that are secreted by fat and hormonal changes that make a person become more insulin resistant. Okay, so that first part of the equation. The problem for South Asians is that we have more visceral fat from the get-go.
That's
So
interesting.
if you were to take a white Caucasian person with a BMI, body mass index of 22, so that's very lean, that's good, and have a South Asian person of the same age and completely healthy and BMI of 22, the South Asian has much more visceral fat. And so because of that, South Asians are more resistant to insulin more resistant to insulin as compared to other ethnic groups such as Caucasians, and so it puts South Asians at risk of developing diabetes, right from the get-go. Now, of course, you remember that I said the insulin resistance is not the whole story, because when I talk about the insulin resistant South Asians, I'm talking about all South Asians. This is a
common
universal problem amongst South Asians.
Yeah.
But not all South Asians will develop diabetes.
Yes.
Those that will develop diabetes are those who have a problem at the level of the pancreas such that the beta cells don't secrete enough insulin for their needs.
Now, what are some of the ways that, again, we're talking about a portion of, a segment of the population that are now more prone to developing diabetes. What would you, as a doctor, and probably as someone who, being South Asian yourself, Tamil yourself, you probably watch, maintain a healthy lifestyle. What are some things that you would say that people can do to kind of prevent or delay the onset of diabetes? Just some basic tips.
Yeah, well, the big thing is not gaining weight centrally.
Very simple message.
And it's a very simple message, and we all know how difficult that is.
Yes.
But it's really important in this context, because if we go back to those two problems that I mentioned, the insulin resistance and the beta cell dysfunction, the problem is that beta cell dysfunction, we don't understand the nature of the problem, we don't understand why that dysfunction gets worse over time, and we don't have methods of treatment for that dysfunction. What we can modulate or treat in 2012 is the insulin resistance.
Okay.
And for people with diabetes, they're often treated with medications to improve insulin resistance. For people at risk of diabetes, they can be treated with such medications to reduce the risk of developing diabetes. And for people, like ourselves, South Asians, worried about the possibility of diabetes, what we can do is try to prevent becoming more insulin resistant, and that means trying to prevent becoming or gaining too much weight centrally.
Interesting. Okay.
And so to step back,
message.
it's such a simple message. I wish I could tell you something more sophisticated, but it really is, healthy eating and active lifestyle to prevent, excessive weight gain.
Now, you're working at the renowned research center at Mount Sinai Hospital on diabetes, and doing some interesting research in this area. Tell us about your research.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we're particularly excited about is that the big problem with the treatment of type 2 diabetes at this point in time is that we don't have any way of preventing what happens at the beta cells. So I said earlier about how to develop diabetes, or type 2 diabetes, you need a problem with the beta cells. And in fact, all the genes that are associated with type 2 diabetes are all, with a couple of exceptions, related to the beta cells and their ability to secrete insulin. In the people that develop diabetes, that defect, and we don't understand its nature, gets worse over time. And after they develop diabetes, it continues to get worse.
Okay.
And this is why many people who develop diabetes ultimately will need insulin.
Okay.
That's a reflection of the beta cells have reached a point where they cannot secrete enough insulin for the body, and you need to give insulin as a medication. And unfortunately, none of our current medications prevent that progression.
Okay.
So they just improve insulin sensitivity. So one of the things we're trying to do is, so that's really the holy grail in treatment of diabetes, is preserving the beta cells. And we're trying to do that. And so we have a study going on right now where we're recruiting people at Mount Sinai, patients with diabetes who have had diabetes for less than 8 years.
So type 2 diabetes, less than 8 years.
Type 2 diabetes, less than 8 years, where we're giving them a medication trying to preserve the beta cells, stop that
the degenerative, if that's the right word.
Yeah, that is the right word. That degeneration or loss of beta cell function over time.
So how can people participate in this? I mean, it'd be a wonderful opportunity to help, to support this research. How can people participate in it?
Well, anybody who's interested in learning more about the study or potentially participating, they can contact our diabetes center. And I can give you the name of the nurse. Her name is Haesuk Choi. And she's the study nurse for this study, which is called the Libra study. And the number where she can be reached at is 416-586-8778.
And you know what? We'll make a point of verifying that when this gets to our Facebook page, which is where you'll get hopefully some people that
I know. You saw me hesitate because you're wondering. You realized that I'm also wondering, am I giving that correctly?
I just assumed you have all this research going on, so the numbers just don't quite.
Phone
make
number
it.
doesn't quite. I can also provide her email, which is another way. And that would be hchoi, HCHOI at mtsinai.on.ca. So hchoi at mountsinai.on.ca.
So I have one final question to throw at you.
Sure.
I've certainly looked at your bio when we had you come in. You've done, you're doing this wonderful research at Mount Sinai. Why diabetes in particular? I mean, I know that just speaking before the show, you've told me that you're interested in science across, like just any sort of form of science. Why this particular area of research?
Well, it's an area of interest for me from both a scientific level and a personal level. From a scientific level, you're always interested in the big challenge, the question that has enormous clinical implications.
That's right.
And that's why I'm interested in diabetes and heart disease. And that leads to the second part, which is the personal level. I'm cognizant of the fact that I'm a South Asian, my son is of the same ethnicity, and this is relevant for our family, our community, and worldwide. And because both diabetes and heart disease are very, very relevant to
We'll have you back on to talk about heart disease, because that's another issue that I think we need to address. Well, I certainly hope that this study produces amazing results. It's much needed. And thank you for being here to kind of raise awareness about this. I hope some of our people in the audience actually call in and participate in this study.
Thank you.
My pleasure having you on. For more information, please also look up the South Asian Diabetes Prevention Program at www.sadpp.com. They have material already translated in Tamil on their website that you can use if you're concerned about how do I get diagnosed and things of that nature. That wraps up our show for today. I'd like to take a moment to say that the team at CrossRoads on TVI would like to add our prayers to those of the community in remembering the lives lost in 2009. Thank you all for joining us. You've been watching CrossRoads on TVI with Manjula Salvaraja.